I want to give all praise, glory, honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, a great millstone, for teaching this truth according to the Bible. And Salakia, y'all, if it's a little loud out. The spot I'm in currently, it's pretty windy out, and there's a lot of traffic going on. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. I'll check the audio before I upload this, and if it's you know if it's too hard to hear, I'll remake the video. But I just wanted to make a quick video. I came across this video on Facebook 2 days ago, or a couple of days ago, going into the colonization of America. And this Edomite here, Johnny Harris, okay, he goes in hard on Esau, man. And just like we always point out with the brothers and through the doctrine of the Lord, you know, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai, the true history and the absolute devilish deeds of Esau Edom is being exposed. All right, and this devil is angry. So we're gonna watch this video, and then I'm gonna pull up a couple of scriptures. Hopefully, it's not too long, but I just wanted to bring this out because what America is about to experience is really a direct result of what's happening here in this video in this history. Okay, so all according to prophecy, and we're at that time. So let's go ahead and listen to this.
In the spring of 1803, two American politicians visiting Paris closed the sweetest real estate deal they had ever seen. With the simple stroke of a pen, their country doubled in size, all for just $15 million. But in this deal, which was called the Louisiana Purchase, the US didn't actually buy this land from France. France didn't actually own the land. What the United States was buying was the imperial rights to this.
In other words, they paid France for the rights, okay, to conquer this land. They paid France to stay out of the way while they slaughtered and raped their way through the land, okay? In other words, they just told France, hey, here's $15 million. Stay out of our way while we go and murder all these people and take their land, all right?
Huge swath of North America. This basically meant that France would stay out of the way and let the budding new empire, the United States, colonize it without interfering. If the United States really wanted ownership over this land, they would need to get it from the people who were here first, which at the time was lots of different native tribes.
Gad, Reuben, Issachar, all these tribes were here. Okay, you see it, right? This is a depiction of the people that were here before, and that looks like Gad right there in this picture. But let me get my first scripture. Okay, Genesis 49, of course. It says, Genesis 49 and 19 says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. In this history, we're seeing right here, this history is the history of Gad being overcome and overrun by these colonizers. Okay, so let's keep going.
Was lots of different native tribes. These are the people who had been here for thousands of years, way before Europeans had the idea of leaving their continent. And this land that the US just bought was theirs. Oh, and this isn't just me, like some modern enlightened person looking back and judging the United States at this time. The US knew that this wasn't their land and that they were going to have to buy it from the people living there. And their big plan was to do things differently, not like the old imperial powers that they had just broken away from. In fact, George Washington was, quote, determined that the US government's administration of Indian affairs shall be directed entirely by the great principles of justice and humanity. Go USA, let's do this in the right way. So instead,
this brings up a good point. Psalms 55 and 21, it says, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. Okay, so they said they wanted to do it equitably, but they couldn't. There's no way they could, because guess what? This is the devil we're speaking of. And what did the Lord say about our enemies? Never trust thy enemy. Ecclesiasticus chapter 12, verse 10, it says, never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. And his wickedness, it showed, it displayed itself in the way that he dealt with Gad and Reuben and Issachar. All right?
This in the right way. So instead of conquest, they would negotiate and sign formal treaties with these native nations.
All of which were broken. None of which were honored. Okay?
Then they would pay them for their land, fair and square. After all, this was a country whose founding document highlights justice, tranquility, welfare, and liberty. The origin story, the first thing that the US ever stole. So Europeans are pouring into this newly formed country, the United States. And the government is making deals and signing treaties.
There is no such thing as Europeans. Those are Edomites. The so-called white man, the so-called European, those are Edomites. That's their true nationality. That's their true identity out of the Bible. And they are the devil that the Bible speaks of. Okay? The people that the Lord hates. Malachi 1, start at 3. And I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down. And they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord Yahweh has indignation forever, because of what they do like this. This is not the first time they've done it, okay? But it's one of the largest scale times they've done it, all right? And the Lord said he hates them, and they would be known as the wicked in the Bible, all right?
Making deals and signing treaties with the tribes, allowing these newcomer immigrants to settle on their land. At first, this is a fairly peaceful transactional process. The US would offer food, farming equipment, cash, the services of a blacksmith, all in exchange for ownership over this land. But unsurprisingly, a lot of these tribes had no interest in moving out of their ancestral lands in exchange for, like, farming equipment. And this is where all of George Washington's ideals of justice and humanity really start to dissolve. The US was becoming a more powerful nation. They needed more land for their booming population. So the impatient settlers and their government started playing dirty.
The westward move was like a great tidal wave.
You start to see what happens when these tribes...
And when you look up the history on what the Homestead Act was, okay, there's a TV show on I believe it's on Prime, Amazon Prime, or it could be on Netflix. It's called Prime Evil, and it's all about this time period of the so-called devil, the white man, okay, coming into America and settling this place, colonizing this place. Okay, it's called Prime Evil. I forget where it's on exactly, but you know, if you look into the history of what the Homestead Act was, basically the United States government gave free land to the so-called Edomites, Europeans, white people that was stolen from Native Americans. So when Gad and Reuben and Issachar didn't want to sell their land, they then moved Gad, Reuben, and Issachar forcibly by the edge of the sword and threat of death. All right?
Tribes say no to the newly powerful United States. In one instance, one group of tribes up near the Great Lakes didn't want to sell their land. They told the United States that this river would be the border and to not cross it, to stay off their land. The US said no, and they took them to war, and lost. Twice. But on the third time, they won the battle and forced the tribes to sign a treaty giving away all of this land, basically all of present-day Ohio. Something very similar happened down here when the Seminole tribes refused to leave their land. The US military came in, another war, killing thousands, forcing the tribes to sign a treaty and pushing them into the swampy interior of the state, where they had no access to their farmland or the ocean. Down here in what was becoming Alabama, the Muskogee Nation refused to sign a relocation treaty, but not wanting to go to war, agreed to sell a portion of their land in return for a guarantee that they could keep the rest. And the United States agreed, and they actually did. And the Muskogee kept their ancestral lands forever. Womp womp, no, that didn't happen. 4 years later, a bunch of white settlers moved in, boxing the Muskogee out of their ancestral land. As tensions grew because of this violated agreement, the US military was called in to force the Muskogee out of their lands. No treaty was ever signed. I mean, the shenanigans ranged the whole gamut here. They would get tribal leaders drunk to trick them into signing this paper that gave them all the land. They would appoint random people to be the tribal leaders and then tell them to sign away the land for the whole tribe. In another conflict, the Sioux and Arapaho nations defeated the US military over and over until the US finally signed a peace treaty acknowledging their land. And they were safe. Until gold was discovered 8 years later, and the US broke their treaty, redrew the boundaries, built roads on their land, and...
So this devil, okay, whenever he finds resources in a land, you can best believe, bet your bottom dollar that he's gonna find a way to get that land. All right, let's get another scripture. Let's go to Psalms, the 9th chapter, which is really good for the wicked. Okay, let's start at verse 2. It says, "I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O thou most high Yahweh. When mine enemies are turned back, they shall fall and perish at thy presence. For thou hast maintained my right and my cause. Thou settest in thy throne, judging right. Thou hast rebuked the heathen and hast destroyed the wicked. Thou hast put their name forever. Thou hast put out their name forever and ever." And this is going to be the fate of Esau Edom for what he's done. And this is a great example of what we're hearing, this history. Go down to verse, I believe it's the 16th verse. Yep. Psalms 9 and 16. "The Lord Yahweh is known by the judgment which he executed. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Hegation Selah." Okay, so, Esau Edom, he's going to be introduced to the Lord through the judgments that the Lord is going to bring upon him. Okay, and it's going to be a harsh, brutal judgment that is well deserved. All right, verse 17, "The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai." So every nation that had their hand, because after Esau came and established himself here, what did the other nations do? They came and participated in the trampling and the stomping of the Israelites. Okay.
And the US broke their treaty, redrew the boundaries, built roads on their land, and before you know it, you've got a bunch of white guys with gold pans harvesting this land. Treaties and justice be damned. Eventually, other tribes caught on to what was going to happen, realizing that refusing the US government would mean violence. So they would sign the paper, take the money, and leave. Over the course of almost 100 years, the United States signed 368 treaties with tribal nations, who were driven out one way or another to make way for white settlers, who established control over this land that their government had stolen for them.
And they called it manifest destiny. They called it homesteading. Okay, they called it settling, right? You had the gold rush, okay? All of this is the crimes against the Israelites that you Edomites have committed, and this is just a small, insignificant portion, okay? There's a lot more that you've done. Now, you know what? I'm not going to call it insignificant because this is very significant because you murdered and slaughtered many of our people, okay? So this is a major portion, just like the other major portions and crimes you've committed against the Israelites that you will pay for in its time.
Yes, you have all the paperwork, all the spreadsheets that they were making, all the treaties, a nice paper trail. But this was all a facade of justice, a thinly veiled campaign for imperial conquest. Okay, so we have all of this fake treaty shenanigans going on to help the United States feel like they're doing justice. And it's working. They are moving loads of native people out of their ancestral lands so that white people can settle it. But there was one region that proved particularly difficult for this extermination project that was going down. Here in the Deep South, you had these 5 large nations that lived side by side with the settlers for a long time. They had all signed treaties with the United States that acknowledged their right to this land. Many of them spoke English, practiced farming, wore European clothes. Some even owned slaves. Because of this, these 5 tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole, were known as the 5 civilized tribes. And there's an alternative world where these tribes could have remained on their land, living side by side with the Europeans as they settled. But that's not what happened. Mostly because of cotton. Farmers down here were getting super rich off of a very valuable cash crop called cotton that they could sell to...
And guess how they were getting rich? Off this cotton industry. By the free, forced manual labor of Jake. Alright? This is what was going on back then. This is when Judah, Benjamin, and Levi were brought over here to be bound in hardcore chattel slavery, which is another crime you Edomites got to pay for.
Textile mills around the world. It was an industry made even more profitable by its key input, free labor from stolen Africans. There was this...
We're not Africans, okay? We're not Africans. We are the Israelites from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. We were on the west coast of Africa because we had fled there, and we were there for about 1,500 years, okay? After 70 AD, in the fall of Jerusalem to the Romans, okay? We fled into Africa, okay, to blend in with the dark, deeply melanated nations of Ham, okay? The Hamites are Africans. The Negroes, the Negroid tribes of the Israelites, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, they are not Africans, okay? Let's get that straight.
One strip of land down here called the Black Belt Prairie that was particularly desirable for farming cotton. But as you can see, it was locked up in what the United States treaties had formally acknowledged as belonging to native nations. But the farmers down here were looking at this as like, this is a perfect place to expand our cotton kingdom. So, these southern slave owners...
And what did I say about Esau when he sees the opportunity to take resource? He's gonna find a way to get it. So you already know what happened.
Did what was kind of becoming U.S. policy towards the people living on the land that they wanted. They made up their own rules. The state of Georgia was particularly aggressive in trying to clear this land out, or in the words of their governor at the time, to replace, quote, all of the red with white population. They targeted the Cherokee Nation, passing a law that abolished...
And that's ironic because Esau is the one that's red. He had the audacity to call Gad and Reuben red, but he was the one that was red, okay? Genesis 25. Right here, Genesis 25 and 25 says, "In the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau." So Esau is red because he had no melanin, and he was flush, he was pink, he was rosy, okay? Just like a little white baby when they come out. They look dead and pale. You can see the blood through their skin. That's why they call them rednecks down south, okay? They sit in the sun, they turn red. They get angry, they turn red. You slap them, they turn red. Anything that happens to these Edomites, nothing at all, and they're red. Their blood shows forth through their skin. They're translucent, all right? No melanin.
White population. They targeted the Cherokee Nation, passing a law that abolished their governments. The Cherokee are not going to stand for this, so they fight back using the same shenanigans that the United States is trying to use, the U.S. legal system. They take Georgia to court, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And guess what? The Cherokee Nation won. Like, there was no way around the fact that they had ironclad rights to this land, signed and sealed. The highest court in the country just ruled that the states could not impose on tribal sovereignty. But, as we all learned in government class, a ruling from the judicial branch only works if the executive branch enforces it. Oh, and who's in charge of the executive branch? Oh, this guy. The guy who wrote a letter to his wife during the War of 1812 from the battlefield saying that he had successfully slaughtered 170 Native Americans in, quote, an elegant style. Oh, and the guy who's on our $20 bill? Yeah, him. Andrew Jackson thought that negotiating treaties with the people who were living here was a ridiculous notion. So he looks at the Supreme Court ruling that validates the Cherokees' right to their land, and he literally responds in the snarkiest way possible, saying, The Chief Justice, John Marshall, has, quote, made his decision, now let him enforce it. No, he was not going to enforce it.
In other words, we don't give a fuck what the courts say. We don't care what the law says and what the treaties say. We're gonna take it anyway. Okay? So that two verses come to mind when I hear that. Okay? Whose oppressors slay them. Okay? Zechariah 11 and 5. And then also, let me get this one. Let our strength be the law of justice. Wisdom of Solomon 2 and 11 says, let our strength be the law of justice, for that which is feeble is found to be nothing worth. So if you're weaker than them, it doesn't matter what the law says. They're going to write whatever they want to write. Even if you have a treaty with them, they're going to dishonor it because you can't defend yourself. Let their strength be the law. In other words, their might, their guns, their muskets, their ability to declare war. Let their strength be the law of justice. Might makes right. If you can't defend yourself, you can't fight against us, we're just going to run buckshot over you, and we're going to take what we want. All right, let's go back to the other one, Zechariah 11 and 5. Whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, and they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord Yahweh, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. So where it says right here, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich. Yeah, that's what Esau says. God bless America, right? God bless America because America was prosperous. So they thought that the Lord was on their side. Okay, so they were singing praises to the Lord Yahweh. Okay, thinking that the Lord was with these devils. Okay, not knowing that this was a setup. This was the okie doke by the Lord. He's got your number, and there's no going back. All right.
Him enforce it. No, he was not going to enforce it. Jackson had a different plan in mind. It came in the form of a new law that he pushed through both houses of Congress. His whole worldview towards First Americans embodied in a piece of American legislation, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This law used taxpayer money to get tribes out of the United States and to
let our strength be the law of justice. Let our strength be the law of justice.
Relocate them to an uninhabitable place that surely no American settler will ever end up.
The Great Plains seemed an inhospitable land to people familiar with the eastern states and of Europe.
This became their dumping ground, and it came with a promise. Move here and we will never mess with you again. And what's crazy to me is that even after all of the shenanigans, all the facades, they continued to play this charade, saying that the nation of Indians may choose to exchange their land where they now reside. The law says that the government had to negotiate these treaties fairly, voluntarily, peacefully, and that the government would, quote, forever secure and guarantee them their new land, and that they wouldn't break any of the pre-existing agreements that they had made in previous treaties. But no, this was just more pretending. A paper trail of pretend humanity. Just as Andrew Jackson had ignored the Supreme Court ruling, he had no intention in following the law that he helped create. But he kept up the ruse. More documents, more signatures, more paper that made these civilized, justice-minded people feel like they weren't orchestrating a mass ethnic cleansing, sanctioned by the government, paid for by taxes, but they were. So this law is implemented, and the United States government, military, and even private companies start to ramp up their removal efforts of first Americans. They focus in on these 5 tribes that were sitting atop the land that they wanted for their cotton empire. More bribes, more pretend negotiations, and when push came to shove, more threats of violence. The Cherokee eventually signed a treaty agreeing to sell their last portion of land, and they moved west, out to their little rectangle of land that had been allocated to them by the government on maps. The only problem was that the leader who signed the treaty on behalf of the Cherokee people was not actually the real leader. They had no authority to make this decision. The Cherokee chief furiously protested this, but the U.S. didn't care. They had their signature from someone. In their eyes, all was justified. Between 1831 and
You Edomites, you so-called white people, you so-called Europeans, You're the real illegal immigrants. You are an invading force. You are a cancerous disease here in America. This land belongs to Gad, Reuben, and Issachar. Okay? You are an illegal alien currently occupying the land of Gad, Reuben, and Issachar. And you have the audacity to talk about deportations, the audacity to come up with a government three-letter agency called ICE to deport people who you deem to be illegal. You have no business. The balls, okay, the chutzpah on you fucking devils to call anybody illegal. You and all your generations, your children, your children's children, your fathers, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers, their grandfathers, and their grandfathers before them are all illegal. And the Lord is going to absolutely have his way in judgment. I just read it in Psalms, the 9th chapter. The Lord is going to bring judgment upon all of you, okay? Very soon.
1838, nearly every member from the 5 tribes was expelled from their land. 100,000 people, whose home this was, now forced to walk by foot for more than 1,000 miles through brutal weather and terrain towards a little box on the map, a place they had never been before. The Cherokee would eventually call this journey the Trail Where We Cried, or the Trail of Tears. Some tried to fight back against their oppressors, and others stood their ground until they were forcibly bound in chains by the US government and herded west at gunpoint. Their land was vacant, and cotton farmers with their slaves moved in, and the economy grew.
Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Northern Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, all Louisiana, all these places were famous for and pivotal for the cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane industries where Jake was enslaved. All on Native American lands that was stolen and forcibly removed. Okay? This is what the Bible is talking about when the Lord says he's going to bring vengeance upon his enemies. Okay? Deuteronomy 32. Okay? Let's get it. Deuteronomy 32 and 35. And it says, to me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time. For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. And the things that are coming upon you, Edomites, oh my Lord, in the name of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, Shalak Rayam, to all you Edomites, okay, and every single Israelite that has ever been in union with you, every Israelite that is joined unto you, every Israelite that's consented unto you, you will all be a part of those judgments.
We'll never know how many people died during all of this, how many lives were really destroyed. Some people say 3,000, other estimates say 15,000, but you don't need those numbers to see how destructive this was. It was systematic, it was documented, and it was enshrined in law. We have a paper trail of all of it, showing the receipts, the payments, the treaties, the bureaucracy of it all. It's like a bunch of spreadsheets from the 1800s. American settlers, in an effort to be different from the old world empires they fled, ended up carrying out the first state-sponsored ethnic cleansing. There's a reason why Hitler, 100 years later, references this exact event, this process, when he was carrying out his own ethnic cleansing. He said that the Volga, which is a river in Russia, would be, quote, our Mississippi. He said that Europe, not America, would be the land of unlimited possibilities. In the spring of 1803...
So you heard it. This devil is exposed. His time has come to an end. Babylon is falling, and the Israelites are going to rise at the return of Yahweh Shai. So with that, I'll close out and give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah Kodash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching this truth according to the Bible. Shalom and above.